The 2026 NFL Draft is about to expose which franchises truly understand the modern game and which ones are still living in the past, and the decisions being made in the middle of the first round could determine playoff destinies for the next 5 years. Welcome back to Bears News Fan Report, your most reliable source for breaking updates, in-depth analysis, and exclusive coverage of everything happening with our beloved Chicago Bears. I'm bringing you critical information today about how the draft board is shaping up ahead of our pick, details about which premium defensive talents are flying off the board before we're on the clock, and insights into the exact type of player we're positioned to land that could transform our pass rush for the next decade. Hit subscribe right now and turn those notifications on, because what I'm about to break down has massive implications for how the Bears build this defense moving forward. The league is splitting into two distinct philosophies right in front of our eyes, and understanding this division is absolutely critical to evaluating what the Bears should do with their first-round selection. On one side, you have teams desperately chasing quarterbacks, willing to trade up aggressively and mortgage future assets to secure their franchise passer. The Jets are making bold moves at the top of the draft, the Raiders are swinging again at the position, and even teams with established starters are taking developmental quarterbacks late in the first round as insurance policies. That quarterback desperation is reshaping the entire draft landscape in ways that directly benefit teams like us who already have our answer at that position. On the other side, you have organizations that are fortifying their rosters with elite, high-floor talent at premium positions. Edge rushers, offensive tackles, cornerbacks, and interior defenders are coming off the board at a rate that reflects how the modern NFL actually wins championships. Defense still matters. Pass rush still determines playoff outcomes. And teams that can generate consistent pressure without blitzing are the teams that advance deep into January and February. The Bears fall squarely into this second category, and our draft strategy should reflect that reality completely. Let me walk you through exactly how this draft is unfolding, because the context matters enormously for understanding what's available when we're on the clock at pick 25. The top of this draft is quarterback-heavy, as expected. Teams are addressing their most critical position, which creates a ripple effect down the board that benefits teams with different needs. But starting around pick 8, we're seeing a run on elite defensive talent that's setting the tone for how the rest of the first round will play out. Washington is grabbing edge rushers, Cincinnati is loading up on pass rush, and the Rams are securing defensive playmakers who can impact the game immediately. The Carolina Panthers sit at pick 16, and their selection is particularly relevant to how the Bears should be evaluating this draft class. Carolina is in rebuild mode, trying to construct a competitive roster from the ground up, and they need impact players at multiple positions. The direction they go with their pick could influence what's available for teams drafting immediately after them, and could set off a chain reaction of defensive selections that shapes the entire middle portion of this first round. Teams are watching Carolina closely because their board and their priorities often align with what other rebuilding franchises are targeting. Now here's where this gets interesting for the Bears specifically. Edge rusher is one of our primary needs heading into this draft. We've made progress building a competitive defense, but generating consistent pressure on quarterbacks remains a challenge that limits our ceiling as a unit. The current roster has some pieces, but we need to add more explosive pass rushers who can win one-on-one matchups and force opposing offenses into uncomfortable situations. The 2026 draft class is loaded with edge rusher talent, but the premium names are going to disappear quickly, and teams drafting in our range need to be strategic about which profiles they're targeting. Carolina's decision at 16 becomes a domino in this equation. They're projected to select Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, a high-motor edge defender who thrives attacking quarterbacks and setting the edge against the run. Howell represents exactly the type of versatile defensive end that modern NFL teams covet, a player who can rush the passer on obvious passing downs, but who's also stout enough to hold up against the run and maintain gap integrity. For the Panthers, he's a foundational piece they can build their defensive front around. For teams drafting after them, including the Bears, his selection removes one premium edge rusher from the available pool. Let me give you some context on Howell specifically, because understanding what Carolina is getting helps illuminate what separates the elite edge prospects in this class from the developmental ones. Howell played at Texas A&M in the SEC, which means he faced elite offensive line competition every single week. He's not padding stats against inferior competition. He's proving himself against tackles who will be playing on Sundays next year. His motor is relentless, he plays with exceptional effort on every snap, and he has the versatility to line up in multiple positions along the defensive front. Those traits make him an incredibly valuable pick for a team like Carolina that needs reliable contributors immediately. But here's the critical question for the Bears. With Howell off the board at 16, with other edge rushers being selected before our pick, with teams ahead of us loading up on premium defensive talent, who's available when we're on the clock at 25? That's where understanding the full draft landscape becomes essential. The Lions are taking offensive line help at 17. The Jets are adding weapons for their new quarterback at 18. The Buccaneers are grabbing a tight end at 19. The Steelers are reloading at receiver at 20. Those picks don't directly impact the edge rusher market, which means there should still be quality options available when the Bears are making their selection. The defensive edge class in this draft has real depth beyond the obvious first-tier names. After players like Howell come off the board early, you start getting into a tier of developmental edge rushers with elite physical traits, but who might need a year or two to develop into consistent contributors. These are players with length, with explosiveness, with upside, but who aren't quite as polished or pro-ready as the guys going in the top 15 picks. For a team like the Bears that has some existing pieces on defense and can afford to be patient with developmental prospects, this tier represents excellent value in the late first round. Now, let me tell you about the player the Bears are projected to select with the 25th overall pick. His name is Romelo from Texas Tech, and he represents exactly the type of developmental edge rusher I just described. Height brings elite length and upside to the position, standing with long arms and the frame to add more functional strength as he develops in an NFL training program. He's got the athletic profile that modern defensive coordinators drool over, the kind of player who can develop into a legitimate difference maker if coached properly and given time to refine his technique. Height's college production at Texas Tech shows a player who's steadily improving and who's just beginning to scratch the surface of his potential. He's not a finished product walking into the NFL on day one, and the Bears shouldn't expect him to be a double-digit sack guy as a rookie. But what he offers is the raw materials that elite edge rushers are built from. The length to keep offensive tackles at distance, the explosiveness to threaten around the edge, the motor to stay active throughout games. Those foundational traits are incredibly difficult to teach, and when you find a player who possesses them in the late first round, you seriously consider making that investment. The Bears' defensive front already has some established pieces, which makes Height an ideal fit for this roster construction. He doesn't need to be the guy immediately. He can rotate in on obvious passing downs. He can learn from veteran players. He can develop his technique gradually without the pressure of being the primary pass rusher from week one. That development timeline aligns perfectly with where the Bears are as an organization. We're building something sustainable here. We're not in desperate win-now mode where every draft pick needs to contribute immediately. Height represents the kind of long-term investment that could pay dividends for years once he hits his stride. Let's talk about what Height brings specifically from a technical standpoint, because understanding his skill set is critical to evaluating whether this is the right pick for Chicago. His best trait is his first-step explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. He can threaten offensive tackles vertically with his burst, which forces them to respect his speed rush and opens up opportunities for counter moves inside. His length allows him to keep blockers at distance and maintain leverage throughout the rep. He's still developing his hand technique and his repertoire of pass rush moves, but the foundation is there for him to become a complete edge rusher once those skills are refined. The projection for height is that with proper coaching and development, he could become a consistent 8 to 10 sack per year player who also contributes significantly against the run. That's the type of player who makes your defense substantially better, who allows you to rotate fresh pass rushers throughout games, who gives your defensive coordinator flexibility in how he structures his game plans. For a late first-round pick, that's excellent value, and exactly the type of player the Bears should be targeting in this draft. So here's my direct question for every Bears fan watching this. Are you comfortable with the Bears taking a developmental edge rusher like Romelo Height at 25, knowing he might need a year or two to become a consistent contributor? Or would you prefer the team target a more pro-ready prospect at a different position? And how do you feel about Carolina taking Cassius Howell ahead of us, removing one of those polished edge defenders from the board? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely want to know how Bears Nation views this draft strategy. The bottom line is that the 2026 draft is shaping up to benefit teams like the Bears, who have already addressed quarterback and who can focus on building elite supporting casts. Carolina taking Howell at 16 removes one premium edge rusher from availability, but quality developmental prospects with elite upside like Romelo Height should still be there at 25. If the Bears execute this pick correctly, if Height develops as projected, then we're adding another weapon to a defense that's steadily becoming more formidable. I'm optimistic about this direction and excited to see how it all plays out. If you want comprehensive coverage of every Bears draft pick, instant updates on our selections, and detailed analysis of how these players fit into our system, you absolutely need to be subscribed to Bears News Fan Report. I'll bring you breaking news the second it happens, expert evaluation of our draft class, and insider perspectives on how these moves impact our championship aspirations. Smash that like button right now. Share this with every Bears fan you know, and turn on notifications so you never miss critical updates. Let's build this championship roster together, Bears Nation.